The restaurant hummed with polished laughter and the soft clink of crystal, but the air tightened the moment Amara Washington stepped inside. She wore her best dress, not to beg, not to plead, but to stand tall in a room that would soon pretend she didn't belong. Across the room, Caleb Washington leaned close to another woman, his hand resting where it never should have. When Amara reached their table, he didn't flinch. He didn't apologize. He lifted his glass instead, an effortless toast to betrayal, while the server quietly informed her that her card had been declined. Eyes turned. Whispers bloomed. Caleb's smile stayed cold as he asked her to leave, as if erasing her were a simple courtesy. Then, unseen by the others, the restaurant manager slid a receipt into Amara's hand, signed dated undeniable, and murmured, "Keep this. Before we dive into the story, tell us where you're watching from and what your local time is right now in the comments. And if you enjoy powerful stories of truth and resilience, don't forget to subscribe. You won't want to miss what happens next." Amara Washington did not cry that night. She sat in the back seat of a rideshare, hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed on the blur of city lights sliding past the window. The driver spoke once, asking if she was all right. Amara answered with a quiet yes, because it was easier than explaining that something fundamental had just been ripped out of her life and that she was still standing. For years, her life had been defined by control disguised as comfort. She had met Caleb Washington when his company was little more than a sharp idea in a borrowed office. He had been charismatic, then hungry in a way that felt ambitious rather than desperate. Amara believed in him early. More than that, she believed in the future they talked about late at night. Shared success, shared power, shared decisions. She helped shape his pitches, softened his rough instincts, introduced him to people who trusted her judgment. She never needed her name on the door. She was content being the one who made the door open. When Caleb's company took off, the world saw him as self-made. Amara never corrected them. Their marriage from the outside looked enviable. A modern house in a quiet, expensive neighborhood. Charity galas where Amara wore elegance without effort and spoke just enough to leave an impression. Vacations planned around Caleb's schedule, not hers, because hers had slowly dissolved into his. She managed the household, coordinated events, smoothed conflicts, remembered names. She became invisible by design. The first time Caleb asked her to sign something for tax efficiency, Amara didn't hesitate. He slid the document across the kitchen island with a casual smile, explaining it in broad strokes. Temporary adjustment, cleaner structure, nothing that changed ownership, he said. Amara skimmed it, trusting the man she had built a life with. She signed because trust was supposed to be simpler than suspicion. Then it happened again, another document, another explanation. This time Caleb framed it as protection. "You don't need to deal with this stress," he told her, voice warm, reassuring. "Let me handle it." Amara noticed how often his tone softened when he wanted something. Over time, small changes crept in. Her credit card limits shifted without warning. Accounts she once accessed required verification through Caleb's phone. When she asked, he laughed it off. "You don't really use those anyway," he said. "I'm just streamlining." Streamlining, Amara learned, meant narrowing her world. She began to sense absences before she could name them. Caleb coming home later, distracted. His phone angled away from her, always face down. New passwords. Meetings that ran long, but produced no stories worth telling. And then there was the scent, subtle but persistent, of a perfume Amara did not own. She didn't confront him, not because she was afraid, but because instinct told her that confrontation would only sharpen his defenses. Caleb was careful. If there was something to uncover, she would need patience. The night she chose the restaurant, it wasn't impulsive. It was calculated. Amara had followed patterns, quietly noticed schedules, watched the rhythm of Caleb's lies grow comfortable. She dressed well because she refused to arrive looking like a question mark. She wanted clarity, not chaos. What she found was worse than confirmation. Caleb didn't look guilty when he saw her. He looked relieved, as if the burden of secrecy had finally lifted, leaving him free to be honest in the cruelest way possible. The woman beside him, Lena Whitmore, wore confidence like armor, her smile. Measured, practiced. She didn't look surprised to see Amara. That told Amara everything she needed to know. Caleb's dismissal had been swift, surgical. No raised voice, no scene. Just the quiet removal of her place at the table. By the time Amara arrived at Renee Parker's apartment, the shock had settled into something colder. Renee opened the door in sweatpants and disbelief. "Amara, what happened?" she asked, already pulling her inside. "I need a place to stay," Amara said evenly. "Just for a few days." Renee saw the absence immediately. No overnight bag, no purse. Just Amara and the clothes she wore. "Did you fight?" Renee asked gently. Amara shook her head. "No." They sat at the kitchen table while Renee made tea neither of them drank. Amara explained only what was necessary: the restaurant, the humiliation, the locked doors, the accounts she could no longer access. She didn't embellish. She didn't soften the truth either. Renee waited for tears. They didn't come. Instead, Amara asked, "Do you still have your old laptop?" Renee blinked. "Yes. Why, I need it," Amara said. "And a quiet room." That was the moment Renee understood. This wasn't grief. This was preparation. The next morning, Amara returned to the house she once called home, not to enter, but to confirm what she already knew. The security system rejected her code. The garage door stayed sealed. A neighbor waved awkwardly from across the street, clearly aware that something had changed. Caleb sent a message an hour later. "My lawyer will be in touch. Please don't complicate this." Amara stared at the screen until the words lost meaning. She didn't reply. By noon, her phone buzzed again, this time from her bank. Unusual activity, access changes, verification required. She followed the prompts only to be informed that authorization now rested with the primary account holder, Caleb. For the first time, anger flickered. Not explosive, not reckless, but focused, controlled. Amara realized then what Caleb had assumed, that she would panic, that she would beg for explanations, for access, for mercy, that she would trade dignity for comfort. He didn't know her as well as he thought. Back at Renee's apartment, Amara opened the laptop and began listing what she still had. Email access, old calendars, cloud backups. Messages archived out of habit. Years of quiet organization never intended as leverage, now forming a map. She replayed the moment at the restaurant, the manager's hand, the weight of the receipt, the way his voice had dropped when he said, "Keep this." Amara unfolded it carefully. Caleb's signature sat bold at the bottom, dated and timed. She didn't yet know how it fit into the larger picture. But she knew this people like Caleb didn't make careless moves unless they believed themselves untouchable. That belief was a weakness. As night fell, Amara closed the laptop and leaned back in the chair. She wasn't planning revenge. She wasn't fantasizing about humiliation. She was recalibrating. For years, she had stood beside a man who mistook her silence for dependence. Now stripped of access and comfort, she saw the truth with brutal clarity. Caleb had taken her place at the table. What he didn't realize was that Amara had never needed the table to begin with. Amara returned to the restaurant 2 days later, not to confront, not to reclaim dignity, but to retrieve context. She arrived early, dressed simply this time, hair pulled back, posture composed. Without the weight of shock, the space looked different. Less glamorous, more calculated. Every table positioned for visibility, every corner designed to be watched without appearing obvious. This was a place built for people who liked to see and be seen. Victor Langford recognized her immediately. He didn't smile. He didn't apologize. He simply nodded and gestured toward a quiet side corridor near the service station. "You have 5 minutes," he said under his breath. "No more." They stood beneath soft lighting that erased shadows without offering warmth. Victor folded his hands in front of him like a man who understood the consequences of precision. "You didn't have to give me anything," Amara said. "Why did you?" Victor exhaled slowly. "Because I've worked here 23 years, he replied. "And I know the difference between discretion and complicity." He explained the process carefully. Private dining rooms required signatures for expenses charged to corporate accounts. Timestamps were logged automatically. Cameras didn't cover tables directly, but hallways, entrances, and transaction points were recorded and archived off-site. Your husband didn't ask for privacy, Victor added. He asked for priority. Amara listened without interruption. Every sentence aligned with what she already suspected. Caleb hadn't hidden. He had assumed protection. Victor handed her a sealed envelope. This is a copy request receipt, he said. Official. Logged. If anyone asks, it was processed according to policy. Amara took it. Thank you, she said, meeting his eyes. He nodded once. Be careful. Outside, the city felt louder. Amara didn't linger. She walked until the rhythm of traffic matched the steady pulse in her chest. That afternoon, she sat across from Julian Cross for the first time. His office was minimalist. Glass steel, no personal photos. He didn't offer coffee. He didn't waste time. Start from the beginning, he said. Amara did. Not emotionally, not dramatically. She laid out facts, the documents she'd signed, the changes in access, the restaurant incident, the receipt, Victor's explanation. Julian listened occasionally, jotting notes, eyes sharp behind thin frames. When she finished, he leaned back slightly. He's setting a narrative, Julian said. Financial dependency, emotional instability, a clean exit that leaves him intact. And Amara asked. A liability he wants to neutralize, Julian replied calmly. But he moved too fast. Julian explained the leverage. If corporate funds had been used for personal expenses tied to an affair, it wasn't just a marital issue. It was a governance issue, a reputational risk, potential fraud depending on patterns. He thought you wouldn't notice, Julian said, or that you'd notice and collapse. Amara's expression didn't change. What do we do? Julian's mouth curved not into a smile, but into something close. We slow everything down, he said. We let him believe his story is working. And we document everything. Over the next week, Amara watched Caleb from a distance she had never needed before. His public image sharpened. Photos surfaced of him and Lena at events subtle, strategic. Articles praised his leadership, his composure amid personal changes. The language was careful. Sympathy without scandal. Privately, pressure mounted. Amara received formal correspondence outlining a proposed settlement. Generous on the surface. No alimony. No claim to future earnings. A lump sum framed as goodwill. Julian read it once and slid it aside. He wants speed, he said. Speed hides cracks. Amara declined without comment. That was when Caleb escalated. He called Renee directly, voice polite, controlled. I'm concerned about Amara, he said. She's not herself. If she needs help, I want to support that. Renee relayed the conversation word for word. Amara listened unmoved. He's planting doubt, Julian said later, positioning himself as reasonable. Let him, Amara replied. I won't correct his lies with emotion. Behind the scenes, Julian began tracing structures. Shell entities, subsidiaries, consulting payments that led nowhere. Patterns emerged, expenses routed through accounts designed to blur intent. Then came the break. Monica Ellis requested a meeting. They met in a neutral space far from offices or familiar routines. Monica looked tired, not nervous, resigned. I won't do this for long, she said as soon as they sat down. I can't afford to. You won't have to. Julian assured her. Just tell the truth. Monica's hands tightened around her cup. The dinner wasn't an anomaly, she said. There are others. Travel, gifts, rent, all coded as business development. Amara asked one question. Were you instructed to process them? Yes, Monica said. And to revise records when auditors flagged inconsistencies. Silence followed. Heavy? Final. Julian didn't react immediately. He simply nodded and said, We'll proceed carefully. That evening, Caleb sent Amara another message. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Amara didn't respond. She placed the phone face down and returned to her notes. The narrative Caleb had built relied on one assumption, that Amara would try to reclaim what she had lost by force. Instead, she was dismantling the illusion that had protected him. She thought back to the restaurant, the way the room had turned on her, how easily status shifted with perception. Power, she realized, was less about possession than about proof. Caleb had taken her seat. He had underestimated what she carried with her when she stood up. Late that night, Amara stood by the window of Renee's apartment, city lights stretching endlessly below. She felt no urge to confront, no desire to be seen. The truth was moving now, quietly, relentlessly. And soon Caleb would understand the cost of assuming her silence meant surrender. The lock clicked red. Amara stood on the front step of the house she had lived in for 7 years, the keypad blinking back at her like an accusation. She tried once more, entering the code she knew by muscle memory. Red again. The system didn't even pause to consider her. She stepped back, inhaled, and looked up at the facade, clean lines, curated landscaping, the careful aesthetic of stability. Neighbors passed slowly, eyes flicking away too late. News traveled fast in places like this, even without details. Her phone vibrated. Security access has been updated, the automated message read. If you believe this is an error, contact the account administrator. The administrator Amara knew was Caleb. She didn't knock. She didn't call. There was nothing left inside that required urgency. Whatever she had valued enough to retrieve had already been taken in more meaningful ways. By the time she returned to Renee's apartment, the first official email had arrived. A law firm letterhead, polite language, firm boundaries. It informed her that Caleb had initiated separation proceedings and that all communication should now go through counsel. Renee watched Amara read it, waiting for reaction. "Do you want me to say something?" she asked. "No." Amara replied. "Silence is cleaner." That night, Amara slept on the couch, fully dressed, phone on the table beside her. She woke before dawn, mind already moving. The absence of routine was unsettling, but also clarifying. There were no meetings to manage, no schedules to adjust around someone else's needs. Just time. By mid-morning, the consequences of Caleb's control became tangible. Her attempt to log into their joint account failed. A call to customer service led to a scripted response. Recent changes had limited access. Verification would require the primary account holder's approval. Amara hung up without argument. She moved methodically through what remained accessible. Email first, then cloud storage. Years of files sat untouched, archived out of habit. Travel confirmations, event itineraries. Drafts of speeches she had edited for Caleb, saved with timestamps that traced her involvement long before his name carried weight. This wasn't nostalgia. It was inventory. Julian Cross called just after noon. "He's moving quickly," he said. "That tells me he's worried." "He should be," Amara replied. Julian cautioned patience. "Speed favors the aggressor. We let him overreach." Caleb overreached by midweek. A courier delivered a formal settlement proposal to Renee's door. Thick paper, expensive presentation. The offer outlined a clean division that left Amara with enough to disappear quietly. No public dispute, no prolonged litigation. A non-disclosure clause broad enough to erase her voice entirely. Renee read it twice. "This isn't fair." "It's not meant to be," Amara said. She scanned the document carefully, noting language that framed generosity as mercy. The implication was clear: accept this and preserve your dignity. Reject it and lose more. Amara set the papers aside. "We won't respond yet." That afternoon, she noticed a black sedan idling across the street from Renee's building. It stayed too long. Left when she stepped onto the sidewalk. Returned the next day. "Do you think he's watching you?" Renee asked. "Yes," Amara said without drama. "Or trying to make me feel watched." Julian confirmed her suspicion. "He's building a record," he said. "If you react emotionally, he'll use it." Amara didn't react. Instead, she focused on Monica Ellis. Their second meeting was brief, careful. Monica's fear had sharpened into resolve. "He asked me to revise expense reports again," she said. "Backdate approvals, clean up inconsistencies." "Did you?" Amara asked. No, Monica replied. Not this time. That refusal had cost her. Caleb removed Monica from strategic meetings citing restructuring. It was a warning. Julian began formal documentation, affidavits, preservation requests, notices that signaled scrutiny without revealing the full scope. Caleb responded with charm. He posted a carefully worded statement about respecting privacy during personal transitions. He attended a charity event with Lena at his side. Her hand resting lightly on his arm, their smiles calibrated for cameras. The image circulated quickly. Comments poured in. Sympathy, support, approval. Amara watched none of it. Instead, she reviewed the restaurant footage Victor had helped request. Grainy, but sufficient. Caleb entering the private room, Lena beside him. Timestamps aligning with corporate charges. Proof without spectacle. The next letter arrived sooner than expected. This one carried a different tone, firmer. It suggested Amara's refusal to cooperate could result in necessary protective measures. Julian read it and shook his head. He's hinting at mental fitness challenges. Let him try, Amara said. That night, Caleb finally called. She answered not because she owed him, but because she wanted to hear the shift in his voice. Amara, he said too gently. This doesn't have to get ugly. It already is, she replied. You're hurting yourself, he insisted. You don't have access. You don't have leverage. You're being advised poorly. Amara smiled faintly. You've always mistaken access for leverage. Silence stretched. Then his tone hardened. If you keep this up, I'll make sure you walk away with less. You already took everything you could without consequences, Amara said. What's left isn't yours. She ended the call before he could respond. Renee exhaled. That sounded final. It was necessary, Amara said. Later alone, Amara allowed herself a single moment of reflection. Not grief, not regret. Recognition. She had loved a version of Caleb that no longer existed, or perhaps never had. The man who locked her out of her own life believed control was permanent. He believed systems protected him. What he didn't understand was that systems also recorded. By the end of the week, Julian filed motions that slowed everything. Requests for disclosure, financial freezes, notices that required response. Caleb pushed back publicly. Privately, his communications grew erratic. Amara remained still. In the quiet of Renee's apartment, with the city humming outside and documents neatly arranged on the table, Amara felt something she hadn't felt in years. Clarity. She wasn't fighting to return to a life that had excluded her. She was dismantling a structure built on her absence. And the more Caleb tried to erase her, the more visible his fear became. Julian Cross did not believe in dramatic victories. He believed in pressure applied quietly at the right angles until something gave way. When Amara arrived at his office that morning, she carried no folder, no visible evidence. Everything she needed was already in his system, cataloged, time-stamped, cross-referenced. Julian motioned for her to sit and closed the glass door behind them. He's testing boundaries, he said, which means he doesn't know where they are. Amara nodded. He thinks I'm isolated. He thinks you're emotional, Julian corrected. That's the story he's telling. That's the story he wants the court to believe. And you, Amara asked. Julian adjusted his glasses. I believe he underestimated the wrong variable. They reviewed the strategy with clinical precision. No public statements, no reactive filings. Every move would be tethered to documentation. Julian explained how courts treated credibility. Consistency mattered more than passion, restraint more than outrage. You don't need to prove he betrayed you, Julian said. You need to prove he manipulated systems to do it. Amara understood. Betrayal could be dismissed as personal failure. Manipulation was structural, intentional, punishable. By afternoon, the first formal request went out: preservation of financial records across all related entities. It was a routine notice on paper, but it carried weight. Once sent, destruction or alteration of data could be interpreted as obstruction. Caleb responded within hours. His legal team objected aggressively, calling the request excessive intrusive. Julian expected it. Resistance confirmed relevance. That evening, Amara met Monica Ellis again. This time, Monica arrived with a folder she kept close to her chest. Her composure had shifted. Less fear, more resolve. "I can't keep pretending this is normal," she said. "I've watched him blur lines for years." She opened the folder and slid documents across the table. Expense summaries, internal emails, approval chains that ended abruptly when questions arose. "He always said it was temporary," Monica continued. "That everything would balance out later. Did it?" Amara asked. Monica shook her head. "No, it just kept expanding." They worked through the night. Amara didn't rush Monica. She let silence do its work, allowing details to surface naturally. Patterns emerged, spending spikes aligned with Alina's travel. Housing costs routed through consulting fees. Gifts disguised as client entertainment. "This isn't careless," Julian said when he reviewed the materials later. "It's systematic." Caleb sensed the shift before he saw it. The next morning, he sent a revised proposal. The numbers were higher, the language warmer. He framed it as reconciliation through fairness. Julian smiled thinly. He's buying time. Amara declined again. That refusal triggered escalation. Caleb filed a motion questioning Amara's mental stability, citing erratic behavior and uncooperative conduct. He requested an evaluation to ensure her fitness during proceedings. Julian read the filing twice. "He's desperate," he said, "and sloppy." The court scheduled a preliminary hearing. In the days leading up to it, Amara prepared not with rehearsed statements, but with discipline. She maintained routine, answered emails promptly, documented everything. She didn't vent to friends, didn't post online. She understood the performance expected of her, calm, credible, unshakable. The hearing was brief, but revealing. Caleb appeared composed, flanked by counsel. He spoke softly, expressing concern for Amara's well-being. He framed her resistance as confusion, her silence as withdrawal. When it was Amara's turn, Julian spoke for her. He presented a concise timeline: financial access changes, security lockouts, unilateral decisions. He submitted documentation showing Amara's consistent behavior and professional communications. The judge denied Caleb's motion. "Concern does not equal evidence," she said flatly. "Proceed." Caleb's jaw tightened. For the first time, the mask slipped. Outside the courtroom, he approached Amara, voice low. "You're making a mistake." Amara met his gaze. "You already did." That night, something changed. Monica called, a voice strained. "He's pressuring me," she said. "He wants me to sign a statement. Says it's for alignment." "Don't," Amara said calmly. "You're protected." "By what?" Monica asked. "By the truth," Amara replied. "And by timing." Julian moved quickly. He filed motions to formalize Monica's role as a cooperating witness, ensuring legal safeguards. He notified opposing counsel of additional disclosures pending. Caleb responded with silence. Then, 2 days later, a system anomaly appeared. Audit logs showed irregular access. Files had been opened, modified, closed. Julian studied the metadata. "He's trying to clean." "Can he?" Amara asked. "Not without leaving fingerprints," Julian said. "And he's leaving plenty." Victor Langford confirmed additional records from the restaurant's secondary log, staff statements, archived transaction trails. Each piece alone was modest. Together, they formed a lattice. Amara watched the case take shape with detached focus. She wasn't invested in humiliation. She was invested in inevitability. Caleb tried one last approach. He sent a message directly bypassing lawyers. "We can still handle this privately. Think about what you're risking." Amara read it once and deleted it. The risk, she realized, had never been confrontation. It had been silence without strategy. She no longer had that problem. Julian called late that evening. "We're ready to file the next phase," he said. "Once we do, there's no going back." Amara didn't hesitate. "Proceed." As she ended the call, she felt no surge of adrenaline, no triumph, just alignment. Every decision now pointed in one direction. Caleb had believed power meant control over resources, narratives, access. He had believed her silence was consent. What he was about to learn was simpler and far more dangerous. Silence, when paired with evidence, was leverage. The first real fracture appeared quietly. It wasn't a headline. It wasn't a courtroom moment. It was a single email sent at 6:14 a.m. from an internal compliance address one. Caleb had created himself years earlier to signal best practices. The subject line was neutral. The content was not. A third-party payment processor flagged discrepancies. Julian read the message twice before forwarding it to Amara with a single line. "This is the thread we pull." Amara didn't celebrate. She asked questions. "Who sees this?" she asked when they met later that morning. "Too many people," Julian said, "and not the ones he controls." They mapped the web. Vendor payments routed through intermediaries. Expense categories broadened just enough to blur purpose. A pattern of approvals that always traced back to Caleb until they didn't. The processor's alert had triggered a routine inquiry, the kind designed to protect institutions from liability. It didn't accuse. It asked. Questions Amara had learned were more dangerous than accusations. Monica Ellis was already feeling the pressure. Caleb called her into a meeting with legal present. The tone was professional, the message unmistakable. He wanted alignment. He wanted consistency. He wanted her to affirm that any irregularities were administrative errors, harmless correctable. Monica asked for time. Caleb granted it with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. When Monica called Amara afterward, her voice was steady but thin. "He's setting me up," she said. "If this breaks, he'll need someone to absorb it." "Then don't stand alone," Amara replied. "Let the process protect you." Julian filed a formal notice of cooperation on Monica's behalf that afternoon. It was a small move, but it shifted the terrain. Monica was no longer an internal risk. She was a disclosed participant. Caleb noticed immediately. He canceled Monica's access to strategic dashboards, citing restructuring. He reassigned her team. He scheduled a board update earlier than planned. The board. Until now, they had been content to trust Caleb's confidence. Results justified latitude. But boards didn't like surprises, especially financial ones. Julian requested limited disclosures, careful not to overreach. He didn't accuse. He asked for clarity. Amara watched the responses come in polite, guarded, curious. Enough to signal concern. Not enough to provoke panic. Meanwhile, Victor Langford delivered another piece of the puzzle. A sworn statement from a senior server confirmed the private room usage, the billing process, the instructions given by Caleb's assistant to handle everything through corporate. The language was casual, familiar too, familiar for plausible deniability. "It's not the statement that matters," Julian explained. "It's the corroboration." Caleb attempted to cut off the source. The restaurant received a formal letter alleging breach of client confidentiality. Victor forwarded it to Julian without comment. Julian responded with policy citations and public-facing procedures. The letter went nowhere. Frustration began to show in Caleb's movements. He postponed the board update, then rescheduled it. He initiated an internal review under counsel. He selected himself a move designed to contain exposure. Julian anticipated it. "Internal reviews are theater," he said. "They're meant to delay." "Can he delay long enough?" Amara asked. "Only if we let him," Julian replied. They didn't. Julian submitted a supplemental filing to the court, narrow specifics supported by the processor's alert and Monica's documentation. It requested oversight, not judgment. Transparency, not penalty. The court granted it. Caleb's legal team objected publicly and complied privately. That evening, Amara received her first direct communication from the board. A request for a meeting. Julian advised caution. You attend through counsel. You answer what's asked. Nothing more. The meeting was virtual. Faces appeared in neat rectangles experienced controlled alert. Amara recognized some of them from galas, from dinners she had hosted, where conversations never touched balance sheets. They didn't ask about the marriage. They asked about timelines, about access, about her role in early strategy sessions. about documents she had edited, communications she had coordinated. Amara answered calmly, precisely. She didn't embellish. She didn't editorialize. She described her involvement as it had been substantive, consistent, documented. One board member leaned closer to the camera. "Why didn't you raise concerns sooner?" he asked. "Because I didn't have proof," Amara replied. "And because I believed internal correction was possible." Another asked, "When did that belief change at the restaurant?" Amara said simply. No one smiled. No one interrupted. After the meeting, Julian called. That went better than expected. "It wasn't about me," Amara said. "It was about gaps." Exactly, Julian thought. Caleb's response came late that night. He sent a message short-clipped. "You're crossing lines." Amara didn't reply. The next morning, headlines shifted. Not accusations, not scandals, just questions. An analyst note mentioning governance risk, a mention of delayed disclosures, language that made investors lean forward. Julian watched the market reaction with interest. "He's losing narrative control," he said. Behind the scenes, Caleb tried to regain it. He offered to reopen settlement discussions, this time with conditions favorable to Amara. Equity, access, silence. Julian shook his head. "He wants containment and accountability," Amara asked. Julian met her gaze. "He wants escape." Amara declined again. The internal review concluded swiftly. Too swiftly. Its findings were vague, inconclusive, optimistic. The board wasn't reassured. They scheduled another meeting, this one without Caleb. Amara didn't attend. She didn't need to. Julian did. When he returned, his expression was unreadable. "They're considering interim measures," he said. "Temporary oversight. Limits on authority." "Temporary," Amara echoed. "For now." Caleb learned of it an hour later. He called Amara immediately. She let it ring. Then a text. "This is getting out of hand." Amara typed once. It already did. You just didn't feel it yet. She set the phone down. For the first time since the restaurant, Amara felt the ground shift beneath him, not violently, not visibly, but unmistakably. The structures he had relied on were responding to forces he could no longer command. The system was doing what it was designed to do, correct? And Amara, once sidelined, had become the quiet constant in its recalibration. Caleb's restraint didn't last. By the end of the week, the tone of the conversation changed, not publicly, but everywhere that mattered. His emails grew sharper, his calls more frequent. The veneer of patience cracked just enough to reveal urgency. He began with reputation. An anonymous tip circulated among social circles Amara once navigated effortlessly. It painted her as unstable, overwhelmed by sudden change, resistant to reasonable compromise. The language was careful, sympathetic, concern masquerading as compassion. Renee heard it first at a dinner she almost skipped. Someone asked if you were okay, she told Amara later, like they were doing you a favor. Amara listened without reacting. Did you correct them? Renee shook her head. No, I let them talk. Good, Amara said. Let them commit to their version. Julian confirmed what Amara already suspected. He's laying groundwork, he said. If this escalates, he wants credibility and reserve. Caleb followed rumor with paperwork. A revised settlement arrived thinner this time, more aggressive in its assumptions. It framed Amara's silence as obstruction, her refusals as unreasonable. The numbers were still attractive, but the clauses were punitive. Broad non-disparagement, mandatory arbitration, immediate execution. Julian circled one paragraph. This is the tell, he said. He's trying to rush you before the next disclosure cycle. Amara didn't ask which one. She knew. She declined again. The response was swift. Caleb scheduled a press-facing appearance, an industry panel on leadership and ethics. Lena appeared beside him, poised, attentive, supportive. Photographs captured her smile, her hand on his sleeve. The message was clear stability, progress, a future unburdened. Amara didn't attend. She didn't watch. Instead, she met with Julian to review the next filings. They focused on sequence, what to reveal, when, and to whom. Timing mattered now. Too early, and Caleb would spin it. Too late, and he would bury it. Pressure without spectacle, Julian said. That's how we keep control. Caleb applied his own pressure. Monica's access was cut entirely. Her title remained, but her authority evaporated. Meetings happened without her. Decisions were routed around her. She's being isolated, Julian said. He wants her to break. Monica didn't. She sent a single message to Amara, "I'm still here." Amara replied, "So am I." The next move came from Caleb's legal team, a motion seeking expedited resolution. They argued prolonged proceedings, harmed stakeholders, destabilized operations, and unfairly burdened all parties. Julian anticipated it. He countered with evidence of delayed disclosures and the third-party processor's inquiry. He framed urgency as risk, not virtue. The court denied the request. Caleb lost patience. He requested a private meeting with Amara, no lawyers, no intermediaries. He framed it as closure. Julian advised against it. "There's nothing he can offer you that he wouldn't put in writing," he said. "I want to hear what he thinks he can offer," Amara replied. They met in a neutral space, a quiet conference room in a building neither of them owned. Caleb arrived early. He stood when she entered, posture rehearsed, expression composed. "You look well," he said. Amara didn't sit until she chose her seat. "You didn't ask me here to comment on my health?" Caleb smiled thinly. "I asked because this has gone too far." "For whom?" Amara asked. "For both of us," he replied. "This isn't how it was supposed to end." "You ended it," Amara said calmly. "Publicly." Caleb exhaled, frustration surfacing. "You could have handled it privately. You removed my access, locked me out, and tried to question my fitness," Amara said. "That's not private. That's erasure." Caleb leaned forward. "You don't have leverage," he said. "You have noise, and noise fades." Amara met his gaze. "You built your certainty on my silence," she said. "That was your mistake." He shifted tactics. "What do you want?" "I want the process to finish," Amara replied. "Without manipulation." Caleb laughed once, humorless. "You think this ends with you winning? I think this ends with the truth," Amara said. "Winning isn't the point." The meeting ended without agreement. Within hours, Caleb filed another motion, this one more aggressive. He alleged Amara was interfering with corporate operations, coordinating with insiders, damaging value. Julian reviewed it and shook his head. "He's overplaying." The court scheduled a preliminary hearing. This time, the room felt different. Caleb's confidence wavered under questioning. His answers were precise but defensive. Julian presented a restrained narrative. Access removed without cause, funds redirected without disclosure, governance concerns raised through proper channels. Amara sat quietly, hands folded, eyes forward. She didn't look at Caleb. The judge issued temporary measures, asset preservation, limited oversight restrictions on unilateral decisions. Not a verdict, a warning. Outside the courtroom, reporters gathered. Questions flew. Caleb offered a statement. Calm, controlled. "We're cooperating fully," he said. "This is a misunderstanding." Amara said nothing. That silence unsettled him more than any accusation. Back at Renee's apartment, Amara reviewed the day's developments with Julian. "He's boxed in," Julian said. "He knows it." "And that makes him dangerous," Amara replied. Julian nodded. "Yes, but also predictable." That night, Amara received a message from Lena. "You don't have to do this," it read. "We can all move on." Amara stared at the screen, considering the audacity of it. She didn't reply. Instead, she forwarded it to Julian. The next morning, a new disclosure was ready. Not dramatic, not explosive, accurate. And Caleb, for the first time since the restaurant woke to a world he could no longer direct with confidence. The pressure was working. Amara realized the affair had never been the center of the story. It was the doorway. The real structure revealed itself slowly, like a building glimpsed only after the fog lifted. Julian spread the documents across the conference table. Corporate charts, ownership trees, transaction flows that looped and doubled back on themselves. What looked like complexity at first glance resolved into something simpler. With patience, control, Caleb hadn't hidden money in obvious places. He had dispersed it through subsidiaries designed to appear operational through consulting contracts that delivered nothing measurable through real estate vehicles registered under neutral names. The architecture was elegant, efficient, and entirely dependent on people not looking too closely. Most of this never touched marital accounts, Julian said, which is exactly why he thinks it's safe. Amara traced a finger along one branch of the chart. This one, she said. What's its purpose? Julian leaned in. On paper, market research. In practice, it's a conduit. Money goes in clean, comes out useful. Useful was a word Caleb favored. It meant flexible, unaccountable. Monica Ellis confirmed it later that afternoon. They met briefly cautious now that scrutiny had intensified. Monica brought no documents this time, just context. He created parallel systems, she said. Anything that needed discretion went there. No oversight, no questions. Who approved it, Amara asked. Caleb, Monica replied. Always Caleb. The more Amara listened, the clearer it became. Lena hadn't appeared in Caleb's life by accident. She fit neatly into the ecosystem he had designed. Travel paid for, housing arranged, lifestyle sustained, all without ever touching personal funds. She wasn't just a relationship, Amara said quietly. She was an expense category. Monica hesitated. She knew, she said. Maybe not everything, but enough. That knowledge reframed everything. Julian adjusted their strategy. We stopped treating this like infidelity with financial consequences, he said. We treat it like misuse of corporate assets with personal beneficiaries. And me, Amara asked. You become the control variable, Julian said. The one who noticed the system because you were pushed out of it. Caleb felt the pressure immediately. His internal team raised concerns about exposure. Auditors requested clarification. The board demanded briefings that no longer accepted rehearsed assurances. Caleb responded by tightening access further. He restricted data, centralized approvals. He replaced independent consultants with familiar names. Each move designed to project decisiveness, but each one logged. Julian smiled when he saw the trail. He's confirming intent, he said. Amara spent her days reviewing, organizing, cross-checking. She didn't dwell on emotion. There was no room for it now. This wasn't about humiliation or closure. It was about coherence, aligning facts until the story told itself. The first crack in Lena's composure appeared unexpectedly. A mutual acquaintance reached out to Amara not with gossip but concern. She's panicking, the woman said, asking questions, trying to understand what's happening. Amara thanked her and ended the call. She's realizing she's not protected, Julian said, when Amara relayed the message. By whom? Amara asked. By him, Julian replied, or by the story he told her. Lena made a mistake 2 days later. She attempted to distance herself, publicly subtle but noticeable. A post deleted, an appearance canceled, a shift in tone. Julian caught it immediately. She's preparing to separate her image, he said, which means she knows something's coming. Caleb responded with speed. He filed a motion challenging Monica's credibility, citing alleged performance issues and conflicts of interest. Julian dismantled it in hours, submitting performance reviews, internal commendations, and correspondence that told a different story. The court denied Caleb's request. The denial mattered less than the pattern. Each attempt to suppress information added weight to the narrative forming around him. Amara received a call from the board again, this time informal. They didn't ask questions. They asked for time. We need to assess, one member said, independently. Of course, Amara replied. The assessment came faster than anyone expected. An external firm was brought in. Their mandate was narrow, but potent: review governance practices, expense controls, approval processes. Caleb objected. The board overruled him. That night, he called Amara. His voice had changed, less confident, sharper at the edges. This is unnecessary, he said. You're escalating. I didn't initiate the review, Amara replied. You did by creating the conditions for it. You're enjoying this, Caleb accused. No, Amara said calmly. I'm enduring it. Silence followed. You could stop this, he said finally. You could say you're satisfied. Satisfied with what? Amara asked. The architecture you built to exclude me. You weren't excluded, Caleb snapped. You stepped back. Amara closed her eyes briefly. You mistook my trust for absence, she said. That's on you. She ended the call. Julian's phone rang moments later. He listened, then nodded once. They've found preliminary inconsistencies, he said. Nothing conclusive yet. It's enough, Amara replied. The firm requested interviews. Monica went first, calm, prepared, honest. Victor provided supplementary documentation. The processor followed up with additional queries. Each step tightened the net. Caleb's attempts to control the narrative grew frantic. He offered settlements. He floated buyouts. He proposed resigning quietly in exchange for immunity. The board didn't respond. Lena tried once more. She sent a message longer this time. Defensive, rationalizing. She framed herself as collateral damage, as someone misled. Amara read it carefully, then deleted it. Julian asked if she wanted to preserve it. No, Amara said. It doesn't change the structure. The external firm delivered its interim report a week later. The language was restrained, professional, devastating. Material weaknesses, inadequate controls, concentration of authority, personal benefit risk. The board acted within hours. Caleb was informed of temporary limitations on his authority pending full review. Decision-making shifted. Approvals rerouted. He was no longer alone at the top. Amara learned of it through Julian. He's boxed, Julian said. He can't move without oversight. Amara felt no satisfaction, only confirmation. The truth, she realized, didn't need force. It needed space. And now, finally, it had it. The courtroom was smaller than Amara expected. Not intimate, just contained. Wood-paneled walls, a raised bench, the quiet authority of a space that existed to slow people down. Everything here moved deliberately, including the truth. Caleb arrived flanked by his legal team, posture, composed expression, neutral. He wore the same tailored confidence that had once reassured investors and silenced doubt. To an untrained eye, he looked like a man in control. Amara sat behind Julian, hands folded back straight. She didn't look at Caleb. She didn't need to. His presence no longer defined the room. The hearing opened with procedural formalities, requests, responses, language stripped of emotion. Julian listened, waiting. Caleb's attorney spoke first, presenting a narrative polished to clarity. The dispute, he argued, was personal, not structural. A marriage unraveling, emotions running high. An attempt by a disgruntled spouse to exert influence over corporate affairs beyond her role. Caleb nodded at the appropriate moments. Concerned. Reasonable. Julian rose slowly when it was his turn. He didn't begin with the marriage. He began with access. He outlined the timeline. Unilateral removal of financial access security lockouts, restrictions enacted without notice or cause. He submitted records dated verified. He framed the issue not as conflict, but as control exercised without oversight. This is not a personal disagreement, Julian said calmly. It's a pattern of exclusion designed to consolidate authority. The judge listened, expression unreadable. Julian moved next to documentation. Expense approvals, corporate charges, third-party alerts. He didn't overwhelm the court. He selected. He sequenced. Each piece supported the next. Caleb's attorney objected once. Procedural relevance. The judge overruled. Then Julian did something unexpected. He stopped. We're not asking the court to decide guilt today, he said. We're asking for preservation, oversight, the opportunity for truth to surface without interference. The judge leaned forward slightly. You're suggesting risk. Yes, Julian replied. And we can demonstrate why. He presented the external firm's interim findings, carefully redacted, narrowly framed. Not conclusions, indicators, material weaknesses, concentration of authority, insufficient controls. The courtroom shifted. Caleb's composure tightened, not visibly but subtly. His hand moved once, then stilled. The judge turned to his counsel. Response: Caleb's attorney spoke quickly now, emphasizing cooperation, ongoing reviews, voluntary transparency. He argued that additional oversight was unnecessary and disruptive. The judge listened. Then she addressed Caleb directly. "Mr. Washington," she said, "do you deny that these structures exist?" Caleb met her gaze. "I deny that they were misused," he said. The judge nodded. "That's not the question." Silence stretched. "I acknowledge the structures," Caleb said carefully. "They serve operational needs." "Without independent oversight?" the judge asked. Caleb hesitated. Just long enough. The judge made her ruling without drama. Asset preservation, temporary oversight, limitations on unilateral decision-making, a directive for full cooperation with ongoing review. Not a judgment, a boundary. The gavel fell softly. Outside cameras waited. Caleb stepped forward first, delivering a prepared statement about transparency and respect for process. He didn't mention Amara. Amara exited through a side corridor with Julian. No statements, no gestures, just movement. In the car, Julian allowed himself a small exhale. "That went well. It went accurately," Amara replied. Back at Renee's apartment, the shift became tangible. Emails arrived. Notifications. Requests for clarification now routed through oversight channels. Caleb's name no longer appeared alone at the top of approvals. Monica called relief audible. "They've reinstated access," she said, "with supervision." "That's good," Amara said. "It's not over," Monica added. No, Amara agreed. "But it's balanced." Caleb felt the balance tip immediately. He sent a message, short, restrained. "This doesn't change the end." Amara read it once and archived it. The following days unfolded with quiet intensity. The external firm expanded its review. Interviews multiplied. Data requests formalized. The board convened without Caleb present. Lena disappeared from public view. An analyst note circulated, cautious but pointed. Investors asked questions. Partners delayed decisions. Julian monitored developments closely. "Momentum is building," he said, "which means we stay disciplined." Caleb, meanwhile, grew erratic behind the scenes. He attempted to rally allies. Some responded. Others didn't. He floated the idea of a buyout, selling his stake, stepping away. The board declined to discuss it until the review concluded. He proposed mediation. Julian declined. He offered Amara a private settlement more generous than before. Equity, silence, closure. Amara declined. "What do you want?" Caleb demanded in a late-night call she hadn't blocked. "I want the truth documented," Amara replied. "And the systems corrected. You're destroying everything he said." "You built it this way," Amara replied. "I'm just not pretending anymore." She ended the call. The pressure didn't break him immediately. It compressed him. Caleb's public appearances ceased. His internal communications narrowed. Decisions once made instinctively now required consultation. For a man accustomed to autonomy, it was suffocating. Amara watched from a distance, not with satisfaction, but with clarity. She hadn't imagined this outcome. She hadn't plotted it from the beginning. It had emerged because she refused to disappear quietly. One evening, she returned to the restaurant not to dine, but to walk past it. The lights glowed as they always had. The illusion remained intact for those who needed it. Victor Langford stood near the entrance. He saw her and inclined his head slightly. Amara nodded back. That night, Julian called with an update. "They're preparing the next phase," he said. "Full board action. It's coming," when Amara asked. "Soon," Julian replied. "And when it does, it won't be subtle." Amara thanked him and ended the call. She stood by the window city, stretching below, steady and indifferent. The world hadn't stopped for her loss. It hadn't slowed for Caleb's reckoning either. It moved forward. And now, finally, so did the truth. The shift from pressure to panic was subtle, but Amara recognized it immediately. Caleb stopped trying to control outcomes and started trying to control evidence. It began with access logs. Julian noticed irregular timestamps files opened in the early hours, permissions briefly elevated, then restored. Not enough to erase records outright, but enough to suggest selective cleaning. "He's testing how far he can go," Julian said, "seeing what triggers alerts." Amara didn't react. "Let him," she said. Every move leaves a mark. Caleb's internal review team issued a quiet update framing discrepancies as transitional errors. The language was cautiously rehearsed. Julian flagged it. This reads like preemptive damage control, he said, not findings. The external firm responded with a request for raw data. Caleb delayed. He cited security concerns, data privacy, the need for consolidation. Each explanation bought hours. Each hour raised suspicion. Then the files started to vanish. Not deleted, relocated, renamed, buried beneath layers of innocuous labels. Julian tracked the activity through mirrored backups and metadata preserved by the processor. The pattern was unmistakable. "He's curating history," Julian said. Monica called in the middle of the night. Her voice was tight. "They asked me to certify revised statements," she said. "Backdated approvals. They want my signature." "Did you sign?" Amara asked. "No," Monica replied. "I asked for written instructions." "Good," Amara said. "Don't move without counsel." Julian filed an emergency notice with the court the next morning, attaching logs, timelines, and a concise explanation of risk. He didn't accuse obstruction. He documented anomalies. The court responded within hours, an order preserving data across all systems and prohibiting alterations without notice. Caleb received it at the same time the board did. His reaction was immediate. He summoned his team, voices raised behind closed doors. Emails flew. Consultants were dismissed and rehired. The company's internal chat lit up with confusion as approval pathways shifted again. Caleb's legal team attempted to frame the order as routine. Julian countered by requesting third-party custodianship for specific data sets. The request was granted. "That closes the door," Julian said. "He can't touch what matters most." Caleb tried anyway. He reached out to Victor Langford, offering compensation for inconvenience. Victor declined and forwarded the communication to Julian without comment. He contacted Lena, urging discretion. She responded with distance. He leaned on old allies. Some returned his calls, some didn't. Caleb then tried a different angle. He leaked a partial narrative to a friendly outlet, an article questioning Amara's motives, suggesting she sought leverage rather than resolution. The piece was thin, speculative, and carefully worded to avoid defamation. Julian read it once. "This helps us," he said. "It establishes intent to influence perception." Amara didn't read it at all. Instead, she focused on the countermeasure Julian proposed, a controlled release. Not to the press, not yet. To partners. They compiled a factual brief, no accusations, no commentary. Just timelines, confirmed reviews, and the court's preservation order. Julian sent it to a small group of institutional partners who valued stability above loyalty. The response was swift and quiet. Meetings were postponed, decisions deferred. The company's momentum slowed, not dramatically, but perceptibly. Caleb felt it. He called Amara again. This time, he didn't mask his anger. "You're sabotaging me," he said. "I'm not doing anything," Amara replied calmly. "The system is responding." "You coordinated this," he insisted. "You think you're clever." Amara paused. "I think you assumed I was powerless," she said. "That assumption is correcting itself." "You won't get away with this," he snapped. "I'm not trying to," Amara replied. "I'm staying." She ended the call. Julian received confirmation that the external firm had secured complete data access. The preliminary analysis was expanded. Interviews were scheduled with additional staff. Caleb's authority narrowed again. The board issued a notice outlining interim governance changes. Certain approvals now required dual authorization. Expense categories were frozen pending review. Lena broke her silence that evening. She requested a meeting with Julian. Amara declined to attend. Julian met Lena in a neutral office. She arrived guarded, composed, clearly rehearsed. She told me she didn't know, Julian reported later. About the funding sources, about the structures. And Amara asked. "And the documents contradict her," Julian said. She received briefings, emails, explanations framed as temporary solutions. Amara nodded, so she knew enough. Julian agreed. She's positioning herself as peripheral. Caleb attempted a last-ditch maneuver. He proposed stepping aside temporarily in exchange for limitations on disclosures. The board rejected the condition. Oversight would continue regardless of his role. That rejection broke something. Caleb sent a flurry of messages, some conciliatory, some accusatory. He accused Amara of revenge, of bitterness, of wasting resources. Amara didn't respond. She spent the evening organizing her notes, updating timelines, ensuring every claim was supported. She didn't indulge in anticipation. She didn't imagine the outcome. She prepared. The next morning, the external firm delivered an interim memorandum to the board. It was concise. Patterns of personal benefit, inadequate separation of duties, elevated risk of misstatement. The board convened an emergency session. Caleb was informed afterward. His role was reduced further. Decision-making authority transferred. A formal investigation authorized. Julian called Amara as the notice circulated. "This is the inflection point," he said. "From here, it accelerates." "Does it get louder?" Amara asked. "Yes," Julian replied. "But not for us." That afternoon, Amara walked through a park near Renee's apartment. The city moved around her phones, ringing children, laughing dogs pulling at leashes. Life continued indifferent to corporate unraveling. She sat on a bench and breathed. Caleb's downfall wasn't theatrical. It wasn't a single blow. It was cumulative, every shortcut, every assumption, every time he mistook silence for submission. The system he built to protect himself was now documenting him. And Amara, once excluded, had become the fixed point around which the truth stabilized. The story entered the public bloodstream without ever saying Amara's name. Julian was careful about that. He didn't leak. He didn't pitch. He responded selectively to inquiries that had already begun circulating among investigative desks. The external firm's interim memo hadn't been public, but its existence was impossible to hide. Too many people had been notified. Too many calendars had shifted. Ethan Cole called Julian first. He didn't ask for gossip. He asked for confirmation. "There's an investigation," Ethan said. "I can see the ripples. I want to understand the center." Julian agreed to speak on background with conditions. No speculation. No personal details. Only verified facts and on-the-record documents. Amara approved the approach. "Let the structure speak," she said. The article that followed was restrained, almost conservative in tone. It focused on governance risk, on the mechanics of oversight, on how concentrated authority can corrode accountability. Caleb's name appeared, but not as a villain, as a subject of inquiry. That was worse. Markets reacted not with panic, but with caution. Partners requested updates. Analysts flagged uncertainty. Confidence thinned. Caleb watched it unfold from his office blinds, drawn phone buzzing with messages he didn't answer. He called Julian next. "You crossed a line," he said. "No." Julian replied evenly. "You did. We're documenting it." Caleb hung up and called Amara immediately. She answered this time. "You wanted this," he said. "Not a question, an accusation." "I wanted the truth recorded," Amara replied. "You wanted silence. You're enjoying this," he insisted. "Watching me bleed out in public." "I'm not watching," Amara said. "I'm working." The line went dead. Within hours, the board issued a formal notice acknowledging the investigation. It emphasized cooperation, transparency, and interim controls. The language was neutral, but the implication unmistakable. Caleb was no longer insulated. Lena panicked. She reached out to Amara directly this time with a voicemail. Her voice trembled, words tumbling over one another. She spoke of misunderstanding, of promises made of assurances she'd believed. "I didn't know it was like this," Lena said. "I didn't know it would end this way." Amara listened once, then deleted the message. Julian advised preservation. Amara declined. "It doesn't change the structure," she said again. The second article landed 2 days later. This one named patterns, expense categories, travel reimbursements, housing arrangements. Still no accusations, just alignment. Facts arranged until intent became visible. The board convened again, this time with urgency. Caleb wasn't invited. They discussed exposure, liability, duty. The external firm presented preliminary conclusions carefully worded, devastating in effect. They recommended immediate action to protect the company and its stakeholders. The vote was unanimous. Caleb was suspended pending final review. The announcement went out at noon. Amara learned of it through Julian, not the news. "He's out," Julian said. "Temporarily." "That's enough," Amara replied. But it wasn't over. Caleb reacted predictably. He released a statement denying wrongdoing, framing the suspension as procedural, temporary, necessary for transparency. He accused unnamed parties of personal vendettas. The language was defensive now. Sharp. Ethan Cole published a follow-up, this one, analyzing the response itself. He noted the shift in tone, the escalation, the absence of substantive rebuttal. Public opinion didn't turn against Caleb overnight. It tilted, slowly, uneasily. Inside the company, the effect was immediate. Decision-making stalled. Teams waited for guidance. Long-standing assumptions cracked. People who had stayed silent began to speak, not loudly, not publicly, but enough. Monica called Amara late that night. "I didn't think it would feel like this," she said. Relief and fear. "You did the right thing," Amara said. "I just hope it matters," Monica replied. "It already does," Amara said. The investigation accelerated. More interviews, more disclosures. The external firm expanded its scope, identifying additional entities, additional beneficiaries. Each finding tightened the narrative. Caleb attempted to negotiate through intermediaries. Offers surfaced. Settlements floated. Conditions proposed. Julian rejected them all. "There's no deal that stops the process now," he said. "Only conclusions." Caleb then tried to shift blame. He implied advisors had misled him, that consultants had overstepped, that systems had failed him. The external firm documented those claims and their contradictions. The truth, when assembled, was indifferent to excuses. Amara stayed focused. She met with Julian daily, reviewing updates, approving disclosures, ensuring alignment. She didn't indulge in speculation. She didn't imagine outcomes. She maintained routine. One afternoon, she returned to the restaurant, not inside this time, but across the street. She watched patrons arrive, unaware, untouched by the reverberations that had begun there. Victor Langford stepped outside for a call. He saw her and nodded. Amara returned the gesture. Later that evening, Julian called with the update he'd been waiting to deliver. "They're preparing formal charges," he said. "Civil at minimum. Potential referrals beyond that." Amara closed her eyes briefly. Not from fear, from finality. "And the board?" she asked. "They'll act once the report is complete," Julian replied. "Termination, recovery, reforms." Amara exhaled slowly. Caleb sent one last message that night. "You could have stopped this." Amara typed a single reply. "You could have." She turned off her phone. The next morning, the external firm delivered its final report to the board entity. It was comprehensive, precise, unforgiving. Patterns of misuse, breaches of fiduciary duty, personal enrichment through corporate structures. The board acted within hours. Caleb was removed. The announcement was brief. No ceremony, no spectacle, just consequence. Amara read the notice once and set it aside. The story had moved beyond her now into governance meetings, legal filings, reforms. It would be dissected, analyzed, debated. But its origin remained unchanged. A woman excluded from a table she had helped build, who refused to disappear quietly. The truth had not needed her anger. It had needed her persistence. The boardroom did not feel triumphant. It felt surgical. Long after the press release announcing Caleb's removal had circulated, the directors reconvened in private. Phones were placed face down, doors closed. What remained was not spectacle, but obligation, the quiet grinding work of repair. Julian attended on behalf of Amara as agreed. She did not request a seat. She did not need one. The agenda was precise. risk exposure, recovery pathways, legal posture, every item framed around containment and correction, not blame. The external firm presented its findings again, this time without redactions. Names, dates, amounts, routes. No one interrupted. When the presentation ended, the chair spoke first. "We have to assume more will surface," she said. "Our responsibility is to ensure it doesn't happen again." That sentence marked the shift. This was no longer about Caleb's actions alone. It was about systems that allowed them, controls that failed, comfort that dulled scrutiny. Julian asked one question: "What protections are being implemented for cooperating witnesses?" The board responded immediately. Formal assurances, written policies, independent reporting lines. The tone was decisive. Julian nodded. "Then we proceed." Outside the boardroom, Caleb faced a different kind of confinement. His access badge no longer worked. His office had been reassigned. His calendar erased. The world he had commanded now moved without his approval, and it unsettled him more than any accusation. He called Amara again. This time, there was no anger, only urgency. "You need to help me," he said. "They're overreacting." Amara listened silent. "I can fix this," he continued. "We can fix this. Together." "Together," Amara repeated calmly. "You don't want this to define you," Caleb said. "We can release a joint statement. Frame it as misunderstanding." "Truth doesn't need framing," Amara replied. "You're throwing away leverage," he insisted. "I'm done trading in it," Amara said. She ended the call. The legal phase accelerated. Julian filed motions aligned with the board's actions: recovery of misused funds, clawback provisions, asset tracing. Each filing was supported specific, narrow enough to withstand challenge. Caleb's legal team responded with delay tactics. Extensions requested. Objections raised. Arguments stretched thin. The court denied most of them. In parallel, civil actions began to surface: investors seeking clarity, partners reviewing contracts, regulators requesting documentation. None accused yet. All asked. Questions multiplied. Lena surfaced briefly in a controlled interview, measured, cautious. She expressed regret without admission, distanced herself from decisions, emphasized reliance on assurances she had received. The external firm compared her statements to records. Discrepancies were noted. Amara learned of it secondhand and did not comment. She focused instead on the quieter work Julian had recommended, rebuilding her own standing on her own terms. Not image management. Substance. She reconnected with contacts she had introduced to Caleb years earlier, not to explain, not to justify, but to acknowledge. To separate her name from his, with clarity and dignity. The response surprised her. "You always were the steady one former partner told her. "We wondered when you'd step forward." Amara didn't correct him. She hadn't stepped forward. She had stepped aside and let the truth move. The court scheduled the next hearing. This one was broader. Evidence was presented in sequence systems, patterns, outcomes. Julian argued not intent, but consequence. He didn't need to prove malice. He proved misuse. Caleb's counsel argued mitigation, good faith, remediation. The judge listened, then asked one question. Why were these controls not in place before? No one answered immediately. The silence said enough. The ruling was measured. Proceedings would continue. Asset recovery authorized. Oversight maintained. Findings referred as appropriate. Not final, but definitive. Caleb's options narrowed to strategy and survival. He tried one last approach, an op-ed drafted, but never published, framing himself as a casualty of shifting standards. It was shelved after counsel advised against it. Public appetite had waned for explanations, without accountability. Amara felt the release in unexpected ways. Her sleep improved, her mornings grew quieter. The constant vigilance eased, not because the work was done, but because it was no longer hers alone. One evening, she met Renee for dinner, not at a place meant to impress, but a small restaurant that didn't care who arrived. "You're lighter," Renee said. "I'm steadier," Amara replied. Julian called during dessert. "They've agreed to terms," he said. "On the civil side, recovery, acknowledgement. And the rest?" Amara asked. Reforms are being implemented, Julian replied. Real ones. Amara thanked him and returned to her meal. The next morning, the board issued another statement, this one internal. It outlined changes independent oversight committees, revised approval thresholds, protections for whistleblowers. Names weren't mentioned. Actions were. Caleb received notice of formal termination effective immediately. No ceremony, no farewell. The company moved on. Amara stood in her apartment, no longer Renee's, but her own again, surrounded by boxes she hadn't unpacked yet. She didn't rush. This chapter wasn't about reclaiming what she'd lost. It was about redefining what she kept. She opened a folder Julian had sent earlier that day, documentation closing out the initial phase. Clear, conclusive. At the bottom, a note in Julian's handwriting. You handled this with restraint. That mattered. Amara closed the folder. Restraint, she knew, was not absence of strength. It was the choice to use it precisely. The system had corrected itself, not because she demanded it, but because she insisted on truth without spectacle. And in that insistence, something larger had shifted. The final hearing did not feel final. It felt inevitable. By the time the court reconvened, the narrative had already settled into place, not in headlines or opinions, but in records. Exhibits stacked neatly, timelines aligned, testimony prepared with the calm confidence of people who had nothing left to protect except accuracy. Caleb arrived late. Not dramatically, just enough to register. He looked thinner, his suit still tailored, but worn differently as if confidence no longer filled it out. He avoided Amara's direction entirely, eyes fixed ahead, jaw set. Julianne stood when called, posture unhurried. He began not with a summary, but with sequence. Authority without oversight, he said, created opportunity. Opportunity became habit. Habit became misuse. He walked the court through the architecture's subsidiaries, consulting contracts, expense pathways. He did not rush. He did not editorialize. Each point rested on documentation already submitted. When Monica testified, her voice did not shake. She described instructions given casually, approvals implied, rather than recorded the pressure to normalize irregularities. She spoke without accusation, without resentment, just chronology. Caleb's counsel attempted to discredit her, suggesting bias, fear retaliation. Monica responded with fax emails, dates, directives, copied to multiple recipients. The judge listened closely. Victor Langford followed. He testified to procedures, to standard practice, to deviations requested and accommodated. He described the night at the restaurant without embellishment, focusing on process rather than people. Was the charge appropriate, the judge asked. No, Victor replied. It was classified in a way that concealed its nature. Caleb's attorney objected. The judge overruled. Then came Lena. She entered, composed, careful. She spoke of assurances of trust, of understanding things to be temporary. She framed herself as peripheral. Julian cross-examined gently. Did you receive briefings on these arrangements, he asked. Yes, Lena admitted. Did you benefit from them, he asked. Yes. Did you question their source, he asked. Silence stretched. I trusted what I was told, Lena said finally. Julian nodded. Trust does not negate receipt, he replied. The court recessed briefly. When proceedings resumed, Caleb took the stand. He spoke confidently at first, a vision of growth, of complex operations, requiring flexibility. He framed decisions as necessary as misunderstood. Julian let him speak. Then he asked one question. Why did you remove Amara Washington's access without notice? Caleb hesitated. It was a personal matter, he said. Why was a personal matter executed through corporate systems? Julian asked. Caleb's answer meandered. Efficiency, protection, streamlining. Julian presented the timeline. Access removed, locks changed, accounts frozen. Protection for whom? Julian asked. Caleb didn't answer. The judge intervened. Mr. Washington, please respond directly. Caleb's voice tightened. For the company. The judge nodded slowly. The company you controlled. Silence settled again. Julian concluded without flourish. This case does not require speculation, he said. It requires acknowledgement that systems failed because they were designed to fail safely for one person. Caleb's counsel argued mitigation, cooperation, remedial steps. The judge listened, took notes, and thanked both sides. The ruling followed later that day. Findings of breach, authorization of recovery, referral for further review where appropriate. No grand language, no condemnation beyond what was necessary. But it was enough. Outside the courtroom, cameras waited again. Caleb declined comment. Amara exited through the side corridor, Julian beside her. Reporters called her name. She didn't stop. In the car, Julian allowed himself a small, rare smile. "It's done," he said. "It's recorded," Amara replied. "That matters more." The aftermath unfolded quickly. Formal notices, filings, transfers. The company announced reforms and leadership changes. Partners resumed conversations. Markets stabilized. Caleb faded from relevance with surprising speed. There were no redemption arcs, no dramatic apologies, just quiet consequences. Amara moved deliberately. She signed documents, closed accounts, reclaimed what was hers by law and equity. She did not pursue excess. She did not seek punishment beyond correction. One afternoon, she sat with Renee in the apartment that no longer felt temporary. "How does it feel?" Renee asked. "Clear," Amara said. "And him finished," Amara replied. "Not ruined, just finished." Julian called with a final update. All actions complete. No pending obligations. No further appearances required. "You can step away," he said. "I already have," Amara replied. That evening, Amara walked alone through the city, unrecognized and unburdened. The noise no longer pressed in. The lights no longer intimidated. She passed the restaurant again, this time without slowing. The moment that had broken her open had also revealed what she had been carrying all along. Strength without spectacle, power without permission. The truth had not needed her anger. It had needed her to stay. The consequences unfolded without drama, which made them heavier. Caleb's name slipped quietly from letterhead and email signatures. His portrait disappeared from the company website, replaced by a neutral line about leadership transition. The machine he once controlled did not pause to mourn him. It recalibrated and moved on. Recovery began with numbers. Julian oversaw the process with exacting care, tracing funds, initiating clawbacks, unwinding structures that had been designed to confuse. There were no sweeping gestures, only careful corrections. Accounts reconciled, properties reassigned, contracts renegotiated or voided. Every action carried a paper trail that did not need explanation. Amara signed what required her signature and nothing more. She did not attend celebratory meetings. She did not ask to be acknowledged. Her role was not to replace Caleb, nor to stand as proof of anyone's virtue. She was there to ensure accuracy, to make sure the record closed cleanly. The board issued a final internal memo. It listed reforms, timelines, accountability measures. Names were omitted. The language was institutional, restrained, intentionally unmemorable. That restraint was the point. Monica Ellis returned to work with authority restored, now framed by protections that had never existed before. She called Amara, once voice steady. "They're listening now," Monica said. "They will," Amara replied. "Because they have to." Victor Langford received a commendation, quiet, formal, deserved. He declined publicity. The restaurant continued to glow at night, unchanged, indifferent to the chain of consequences it had triggered. Lena settled quickly. Her legal exposure narrowed as facts clarified. She returned what was required, avoided what she could not undo. She left the city within weeks, her departure unnoticed by most. There were no public reckonings, no interviews. Just a line drawn where benefit ended. Caleb, meanwhile, attempted reinvention. He released a statement weeks later, measured, reflective, acknowledging mistakes without naming them. He spoke of lessons of growth, of moving forward. It landed softly and disappeared. The appetite for his perspective had passed. Amara felt the shift internally before she recognized it externally. The vigilance that had carried her through the last months eased. She no longer woke anticipating updates. She no longer cataloged risks in the background of her thoughts. The quiet that returned was not empty, it was spacious. She moved into her own place again, smaller than the house she'd shared with Caleb, but chosen with intention. She unpacked slowly, arranging rooms to suit no one but herself. There was comfort in deciding where things belonged. Julian called once more to close the file. "All obligations satisfied," he said. "No loose ends." "Thank you," Amara replied. "You were precise," Julian said. "That made my job easier." Amara smiled faintly. It made mine bearable. When the call ended, she sat with the stillness. Justice, she realized, was rarely loud. It did not announce itself with vindication or applause. It settled like dust after a storm, revealing what had been standing all along. She had not won a spectacle. She had corrected a record. The final court notice arrived a week later, brief, procedural, conclusive. The matter was closed. Amara placed it in a folder and slid it into a drawer she did not plan to open again. That evening, Renee came by with a bottle of wine. They didn't toast. They ate takeout on the floor and talked about things unrelated to the last year. At one point, Renee paused. "Do you ever wish you'd handled it differently?" Amara considered the question carefully. "No," she said. "I wish I'd trusted myself sooner." Renee nodded, understanding more than she said. Amara returned to work on her own terms, not the work she had done invisibly before, but projects aligned with her values. Advisory roles, strategic planning, quiet contributions that mattered without demanding credit. She declined interviews. She declined invitations framed as recognition. She did not need to be known for what she had endured. What mattered was what she had preserved. One afternoon, she walked past the courthouse again, not to enter, not to reflect, just passing through. The building stood as it always had, indifferent to individual outcomes. Inside, new cases were being heard, new stories written. Amara felt no attachment to it. She had moved beyond the need for validation. Caleb remained absent. His attempts to resurface were tentative, cautious. Each effort met with polite disinterest. The world had not turned against him. It had simply stopped revolving around him. That Amara thought was the most fitting consequence. The chapter closed without ceremony. Not because it lacked weight, but because it had done its work. The first morning, Amara woke without a plan. She knew the story had truly ended. No hearings on the calendar. No filings to review. No calls to anticipate. The silence felt different now. Not tense, not provisional, but complete. She lay still for a moment, listening to the city beyond her window, and realized she was no longer bracing for impact. She was simply awake. Amara's days rebuilt themselves slowly, deliberately. Not as a reaction to what she had survived, but as a continuation of who she had always been before her life. Narrowed around someone else's ambition. She returned to work, but not to the kind she had done invisibly for years. She chose advisory roles, where her judgment mattered and must time where name was attached. She declined anything that required performance without substance. People noticed. They adjusted. One afternoon, she met with a small group of women founders, consultants, executives, who had reached out quietly after hearing fragments of what had happened. They didn't ask for details. They asked how she stayed steady. "I didn't," Amara told them honestly. "I stayed precise." Precision, she explained, was what allowed her to move without rage, without spectacle. It was what kept her from becoming reactive in a system that rewarded calm consistency over emotional truth. That conversation became a pattern. Amara began dedicating time to mentoring women, navigating financial entanglements. They hadn't fully designed marriage as partnerships, inheritances where trust had replaced verification. She didn't preach caution. She taught clarity. Understand structures, ask questions early, preserve access, trust instincts before they have language. She didn't frame it as empowerment. She framed it as literacy. The project grew organically. No press, no branding at first. Just a network of women sharing strategies, not stories. Solutions, not wounds. Renee teased her once. "You're building something," she said. Amara shrugged lightly. "I'm restoring balance." Caleb's name surfaced occasionally, usually secondhand. He had taken a position elsewhere, smaller, quieter, framed as a fresh start. There were no grand comebacks, no declarations of growth. He moved cautiously now, aware of records of scrutiny. Amara felt no satisfaction in that knowledge. She had not needed him diminished to feel whole. One evening, she returned to the restaurant, not for memory, but closure. She requested a table alone. The space felt neutral now, just a room, just light. The weight it once held had lifted. She ordered, simply ate, slowly paid with her own card, without hesitation. Victor Langford noticed her as she stood to leave. He approached with the same professional distance he always had. "I'm glad to see you well," he said. "So am I," Amara replied. Outside, the night air was cool. The city no longer felt like a witness. It felt like a place she belonged again. Amara's life did not transform into something louder or more dramatic after justice. It became quieter, more exact, more hers. She no longer needed to be careful with her energy. She spent it where it mattered, on work that aligned, on people who listened, on herself. One afternoon, she received a message from Julian. Just a note. "I hope you're doing well. For what it's worth, your case changed how a few people think about power." Amara smiled as she read it, then archived the message. She didn't need legacy. She needed continuity. That night, standing at her window, city lights stretching endlessly below, Amara reflected on the version of herself who had walked into a restaurant wearing her best dress, not to beg, not to plead, but to face the truth. That woman had been at her weakest, and also, unknowingly, at the beginning of her strongest alignment. Justice had not restored what was taken. It had clarified what could not be taken at all. Amara Washington had not raised her voice. She had not demanded belief. She had stayed. And in staying calm, deliberate, unmovable, she had reclaimed her life without ever asking permission. Some betrayals don't announce themselves with chaos. They arrive quietly disguised as control, comfort, or what's best for you. And often the deepest injustice is not the act itself, but the expectation that silence means surrender. Amara's story reminds us of something powerful. You don't need to be loud to be strong. You don't need to rush to be effective. Real power comes from clarity, knowing what matters, documenting what's true, and refusing to disappear when someone else decides you should. Justice doesn't always look like revenge. Sometimes it looks like systems correcting themselves because one person chose precision over panic, truth over theatrics, and dignity over desperation. If you've ever felt pushed aside, underestimated, or erased, remember this: silence paired with intention is not weakness. It's leverage. And when you stay grounded long enough, the truth has a way of surfacing without you having to force it. Now, we'd love to hear from you. Have you ever faced a moment where staying calm was your greatest strength? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if stories like this resonate with you, don't forget to subscribe for more powerful narratives about resilience, justice, and quiet strength.